going to update my balance sheet. So all at the same time are going to write like my new balance sheet. Like if I spend 10 coins or 15, my new balance sheet is going to be 5. So that's something that nobody is going to be able to change because everyone has a copy. So if someone is trying to change it, you are all going to be here, like going to look at this guy and say, like, hey, something is not correct here, it's wrong. So please update your ledger, update. So you can think of block as like a sheet of paper. Like every block is a new piece of paper in a book. So you type like the list of transaction. When you write the transaction, you see the transaction is legit or not. When you say legit, like is this transaction compatible with the balance of this specific account, for example. So can this transaction be performed? Yes. Then once you have like all those list of let's say, paper that has written all the transactions, you are basically hashing it. To do this hash in a block, we have different consensus mechanisms. So do you know how Bitcoin is like? What's the consensus for Bitcoin, for example?
No.
Which means? Exactly. So in proof of work, a computer needs to do a certain computational algorithm in order to be able to validate a new block. This requires like some energy basically, so that's why we call it proof of work, so people need to work towards it. In Bitcoin, it's basically updated the complexity is updated based on how much computational power the network has. So it's something that is exponentially growing because there's more computer coming. So the difficulty is basically increasing. Where for BNB Chain, it's a proof of stake authority. So which means that you are basically staking your assets in exchange to have the right to create new blocks. So the computational power is much lesser, but in exchange, because it's like doesn't require such much as computational power, potentially it's easier to revert back, because like if you have enough computational power, you can just revert back. But in order to be able to validate, you need to stake your assets. So let's say I want to participate in the BNB chain, I need to stake, let's say $500 million in order to be eligible to the validation. So the likelihood that someone is going to do something bad is way lesser, because if someone is doing bad, like basically all the staked token that is staked is going to lose it. So that's why we call it proof of stake.
So, quick question.
Sure.
So proof of stake, how do you actually verify it if it's not?
So you still have a computational algorithm that you need to perform to verify that the transaction is legit, but to produce a block, the computational requirement is way lesser as for proof of work, for example. Because for proof of work, in order to be able to validate a new block, you need to find a certain nonce, as we call it. So the hash of the new block need to be with a certain number of zero in the front, for example. And to be able to find this hash, as you know, like you cannot find the hash before computing the hash. So in order to find this specific hash with a certain amount of zero, you need to add a different nonce within the block to generate a new hash. So that's why you need to try a computation like multiple times. Where for proof of stake, we don't have that mechanism of having this complexity. It's just like once you have the data, you can produce it via legit. So it's really quick and easy. We remove the complexity of the block producing to make it easy and more scalable, but in exchange, the validator needs to stake his assets towards us. So if he's doing something bad, we can basically take it off. Any other questions? So what does a block contain? So as you know, like we have this like paradigm with like the scalability, the security, and the throughput as well. So we cannot go too fast, we cannot go too slow as well. Like if you want to transact, since you need to wait for the block to be validated. So a block is containing like a specific size. So for example, on Bitcoin, it has a specific size. On Ethereum, a block has a specific size. On BNB Chain as well. So the size is going to define how many transactions you can have. On BNB Chain, the size is quite big, so you can encapsulate a lot of transactions inside. So we say big, so for example, let's say on Bitcoin you have only 10 sheets, which you can write in a block, and this is every 10 minutes. Let's say on ETH, you can only write 2 sheets of paper every 10 seconds. On BNB Chain, for example, you can write 10 sheets every 3 seconds. So we have like a higher throughput, for example. So you can write way more transactions as any other blockchain, because we have like a block every 3 seconds compared to other, which is like 10 seconds or 10 minutes for Bitcoin. And we have like way more transactions within a block. So we have different metadata inside, which is basically the most important one is like the link to the previous block, which is showing like the chain of custody of the blocks to ensure that the new one that has been created is linked to exactly the previous one. And immutability, so the cryptographic connection between each is basically making tamper-proof and secure.
What's gas limit and gas use under metadata?
So the gas limit and gas used is linked to the size of the block. You have one which is like the number of transactions you can have, and when you execute a smart contract, you execute a function in this contract. And each function has a specific cost, and this cost is called as gas, basically. And you need to pay the validator in order to reward him to execute your function in a smart contract. So the consensus, let's say, based on how many transactions there is, you are going to have a specific gas price. And based on how much gas your function is using, you are going to pay a certain amount of fees. And each, the gas limits on, you can see it here, gas limit is like 81 million here. So on ETH, the limit is 20 million, if I'm correct. And on BNB Chain, it's like 120 million. So we can have like process more transaction and higher function because our gas limit is much higher as well. And then the usage is just like, what was the usage of this specific block compared to the limit? Like, is it 15%? So this is quite useful, like to see the activity on chain as well, to see like how many users are using the chain at a specific time. So on the BNB Chain, because we have a fixed, let's say, price cost when you run a transaction, we don't have this like transaction fee which is spiking up, like on ETH. So on ETH, for example, because the block is much smaller, there's more congestion. So the gas used is usually like, maybe let's say 90%. But then if you want to be in those 90% when you send a transaction, you need to pay more fees because you want to give more incentive to the validator because you want him to use your transaction and not someone else. So to incentivize him, you basically give him some tips. Like in a restaurant, like if you give 20% or 10%, the restaurant is going to choose you because you give more tips compared to another one. It's basically the same here. So but on the BNB Chain, because there are more throughput, we don't have this issue of like transaction scalability. Any other questions? That's the one answer. So here different consensus mechanisms. So the consensus is like, who do we give the authority to validate the block? Because on proof of work, for example, on Bitcoin, everyone here can have his own computer and try to participate. But of course, because you have a small computer, you're not going to be able to compete with the large farming industry. So in some blockchain, they're using proof of authority, which means that let's say I have my own blockchain that I want to set up, and I allow only like those 3 people, because I know them, I trust in them, I'm going to give them the authority to be the block producer. But this is a bit centralized, let's say. Then on ETH, for example, there's a proof of stake. So you need to stake a certain amount of ETH. And if you have the minimum threshold, like everyone can participate. So potentially in this room, everyone could be a validator on ETH if they have enough funds to support themselves. On BNB Chain, it's more like a proof of stake authority. So you need to stake. It's open to everyone, but only to the top 23 or top 21 are going to be eligible to be a validator. So this is basically you need to stake a certain amount of BNB to be in the top 21 staker in order to be validator. So we are not choosing who is going to be the validator, but it's just like the token economy which is going to choose who can validate. So it's still open and decentralized that way. Questions? Sure.
How many of the validators does Binance run?
Balancing the entity?
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. I think none. Yeah. So basically, if you look at here, BNB Chain staking. So this is the page where you can see all our validator live, and you can see as well. So it's ranked by what we call voting power. So how many BNB they have staked, and here you can see like the name of the validator basically. So you can see like those are some like of service provider which are like providing nodes for people, or like when you want to connect to a contract or to a web app, you can use like, you need to use some specific what we call like RPC connector, which is the way to connect to a specific node that can then read in a smart contract. So those, for example, are like those kind of RPC provider. So on here you have like inflow and consensus. So here we have a few different ones as well. So those are our like current set of validators. But so potentially this one right now is inactive because he hasn't met the like ranking is not above the previous one. So if this one tomorrow want to be validator, it would need to attract delegation from a community member, for example, to be able to be on top of this one, to be active. So it's quite changing frequently based on the dynamic of the on-chain data. Now about smart contracts. So why do we call them smart? Yeah.
Yeah, what does one get out of being a validator?
So on every blockchain, there's a different token economy. So let's say on proof of work on Bitcoin, like a validator, every time it's validating a new block, is getting block reward.
So you guys, like the top ones that are validators will get tokens?
So we are not minting new tokens compared to other chains, like compared to Bitcoin, where like every block you have new, on the ETH, it does seem like you have new token plus transaction fee. On BNB Chain, it's you only get the reward that the user is paying you as transaction fees. So when you are sending that transaction, you need to pay that transaction fee. So the validator, this is the fee that is going to receive. So we are not minting or generating new block every new block that is produced, basically.
Okay.
So on that, how many people are active actually? So 20?
It's not people, it's entities, let's say. So right now we have, we added some randomization as well. So out of the first 21, we are going to randomly select 19.
Okay.
And from the 23rd to 25th position, we are going to select 2 randomly every 10 minutes. So we are doing this randomness as well to add more robustness and more security and more decentralization to our protocol.
So wouldn't this be easier for a bad actor to actually, manipulate other than when you compare it to proof of work?
Right. So for a bad actor, potentially you will need to hold like 2/3 of all those active nodes.
I mean, a country could easily do that, right? Let's say a country wants to, a country or a huge hacker group could actually do that, right?
Though they will need to buy a shit ton of BNB.
Okay.
That's
Is it a lot of money?
Well, let's say the average price, let's say to stake, let's say it's 800K. So let's say I go to market cap. I go to BNB Chain. It's a lot and not a lot at the same time. Like compared to some like industry, it's not that much money, but compared to the blockchain industry right now, like it would move the needle of BNB Chain if someone wanted to buy that much money. Well, it's not holding this maybe I think.
Yeah.
Here. So BNB Chain right now is at like 283. So if you multiply this by 800K, that's going to be quite a sum.
That's just to get one node, right? You need to get 2/3.
Exactly, that's just to get one, so you will need to do that times. Not impossible, but then like it will, like if
Right, so
someone will
BNB
push.
Chain, since it's 280, let's say a coin is worth like 10 cents or 20 cents,
Right.
it could be easier, right? Compared to proof of work. When you compare it-
But then the amount stake here will be much higher as well,
Okay.
because it's linked to the token economy at the end as well. Makes sense. Yeah. And we have the efficiency mechanism, so every transaction we are burning 10% of it. And since we are not generating new BNBs, like every time there's a new block, there's like lower supply as well. It's kind of to put pressure as well to the token economy. So back to the smart contract. So we say it's stress test because once you write the code and you push it, it's basically just a contract which is executing. Like you don't need to have any trust in any authority in order to execute it. Trackable because you can see like every action that is happening as well. You can only see it, let's say, if the contract is open source. So it's not mandatory to put the smart contract in an open source way. But if you push it, it's like encoded in bytecode as we call it. So by default, you cannot read a smart contract like from outside sources. But if someone is pushing the contract definition, then someone can see what's really happening inside it. Irreversible because like once it's in a block, you cannot go back and change the state of the smart contract as well. And we say like it's self-executing because it can basically, once you send the transaction, it's going to execute itself. Time's up?
Yeah, like 2 or 3 more minutes.
Okay. Maybe, Tyler. you want to introduce a bit, because I think the time is a bit short.
Sure.
Yeah. So I just want to introduce Tyler, which is from Binance Lab. So whenever you want to build something on BNB Chain, we have as well like Binance Lab, which is looking at young projects and how we can support them from an investment and collaboration point of view.
Sure.
You can just introduce a bit the program.
Yeah, I'll just do a very quick introduction. So, Binance is the largest centralized exchange globally by trading volume, liquidity, and also users. Also, Binance Labs, we're basically the VC arm of Binance. So we make investments across different, chains and also different stages. So we do, early stage incubations and also ventures and also OTC secondary deals and also do fundraising. We've been investing since 2018. So we've invested over 200 plus projects. Some of our portfolios, I'm not sure if you guys have heard of it, Polygon. It's one of the largest layer 2s within the ecosystem. Do analytics, one of the most used, analytic tooling within Web3. So we're quite, crypto native. We have a partnership with BNB Chain for an incubation program. It's called MVP, which stands for Most Valuable Builders, in which we invest in, early stage companies. We provide, different curriculums to the projects to help them grow, navigate the entire finance and also BNB Chain ecosystem. So the program is 8 to 10 weeks. So within the 8 to 10 weeks, you'll have, each week you'll have at least 1 to 2 different courses to tailored to support your needs throughout your venture journey. So some topics include product market fit, marketing, PR, fundraising, tokenomics, security and auditing, smart contracts. So there are a variety of speakers we'll be inviting to the classes. These are going to be the most experienced veterans within the Web3 ecosystem. By the end of the program, you'll also have a demo day, which you'll get a chance to present to different VCs, or sort of investor networks, to really showcase your product, your team, and also your vision of the projects. So that's really a quick brief of the incubation program in Binance Labs.
So yeah, if you want to build something, just go to our Telegram, contact us, like we can then see how we can mentor you as well, because we want to mentor like project young, especially young students like you, want to join Web3, like how we can guide you, how we can provide tutorial workshop, how we can like work grow the industry together basically.
Disclaimer, we are separate, so BNB Chain is fully decentralized and we're centralized. Yeah, people always get confused, so.
And there always there. If you have other questions, you can just find us at the booth, and we'll likely we're going to slowly push more tutorial workshop and invite you some virtual workshop as well, so like the student Telegram that we have. So feel free to connect, and we're going to try to bring more awareness about Web3 in general and about BNB Chain as well to all of you guys. Thanks.
So much.